To understand what happened, you need to understand New Orleans in 1918. The city was already under enormous pressure. World War I had just ended. The Spanish flu pandemic was killing thousands across the country. People were frightened before any of this started. And then something worse arrived. May 22, 1918. A delivery man found grocers Joseph and Catherine Maggio in their bedroom. Both had been struck with an axe while they slept. A straight razor lay nearby, stained with blood. On the back steps, detectives found a chisel, and the back door had a panel neatly removed, carved out from the outside, while the family slept a few feet away. No fingerprints, no robbery, no motive. On the sidewalk outside, written in chalk, were the words, "Mrs. Maggio is going to sit up tonight, just like Mrs. Tony." Nobody knew what that meant. Nobody knew who Mrs. Tony was. The message was never explained. Detectives were already lost. 6 weeks later, it happened again. A delivery man found grocer Louis Bessumer and his companion, Harriet Lowe, in their home, both attacked in their sleep. Same method, same silence, same chiseled door panel, same absence of evidence. Louis Bessumer survived. Harriet Lowe did not. 3 weeks after that, a pregnant woman named Anna Schneider was attacked in her bedroom. Somehow, she survived. Her baby was delivered safely days later. When she recovered enough to speak, she described only a dark shape standing over her in the dark. Then in August, a barber named Joseph Romano was killed. His nieces, who lived in the same house, ran into the hallway after hearing the noise. They caught one brief glimpse, a large man in a dark coat disappearing through the back door, and then he was gone. By this point, the city was frightened. Newspapers ran the story every day. Hardware stores sold out of axes, as if people believed owning one might help. Police had no weapon, no suspect, no motive beyond the pattern. Most victims were Italian-American grocers. That detail would drive the investigation for years. Winter came. The attacks stopped. People began to breathe again. The Axeman wasn't done. A letter arrives at the newspaper. It is addressed to the entire city, from the killer himself. The letter reads, "I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell." And it ends with an ultimatum. Play jazz music in your home at midnight on Tuesday, or I will visit you. That night, every jazz club in New Orleans was packed. Nobody ever found out who sent it. Police followed two main directions. The first was the Mafia connection. The Black Hand, an Italian-American organized crime network, was extremely active in New Orleans at this time. They were known to extort Italian immigrant business owners. The theory was straightforward. Grocers who refused to pay protection money were being made into examples. This theory has real weight. The timeline of attacks lines up roughly with known Black Hand activity in the city. Several victims had received threatening letters beforehand, and the attacks stopped around the same time that law enforcement cracked down heavily on mafia operations in New Orleans. But the theory has gaps. Not all victims fit the Italian-American grocer profile cleanly. No mafia connection was ever proven in a courtroom, and organized crime typically doesn't leave cryptic chalk messages on sidewalks or send jazz ultimatums to newspapers. The second theory is more personal. In 1921, 2 years after the attacks ended, a woman in Los Angeles shot and killed a man named Joseph Mumfre. Her name was Esther Albano. She had been the widow of Mike Pepitone, the last Axeman victim. She told police that Mumfre was the Axeman. Investigators looked into it seriously, and they found something that stopped them cold. Mumfre had been in prison during the exact years between the first and second waves of attacks. His prison release date aligned almost perfectly with when the 1919 attacks began. When he was locked up, the attacks stopped. When he was free, they resumed. It was the most compelling lead the investigation had ever produced. But there was no physical evidence, no weapon, no confession. Mumfre denied everything. Esther Albano served 3 years in prison for the shooting, was released, and then disappeared entirely from public records. Joseph Mumfre was never officially named the Axeman. Over the decades, researchers have returned to this case repeatedly. Modern forensic techniques could theoretically extract something from original evidence, but most of that evidence no longer exists. It decayed, was lost, or was simply never properly preserved in the first place. What remains is a pattern of attacks, a letter that may or may not be authentic, 2 innocent men who almost hanged, and a city that danced while a killer either watched or danced with them. Grocer Mike Pepitone was found dead by his wife. She had heard sounds and run into the bedroom. The attacker was still in the room. She saw him, or what she thought was him, and then he fled through the back door. She described only a large, dark figure. And then the attack stopped, permanently. No announcement, no final letter, no confrontation. The city waited through the winter of 1919 and then through 1920, and the Axeman never returned. The Axeman of New Orleans never really left. Over a century later, the case still draws researchers, journalists, and investigators. In recent years, historian Miriam Davis published a detailed book arguing that the mafia connection is more solid than most people acknowledge, and that the killer's identity may have been known inside certain communities at the time, but was deliberately buried. Whether that is true or not, the case leaves something behind that most cold cases do not. That letter, that Tuesday night, that city dancing. It is impossible to know if the Axeman watched from the street as New Orleans played jazz to protect itself. But someone wrote that letter knowing it would work, knowing that a city at the edge of fear would do exactly what it was told. That is not the behavior of a disorganized attacker. That is something else entirely. 12 attacks. At least 6 confirmed dead. 0 confirmed suspects. 1 unsolved letter. 1 unanswered question that has outlasted everyone who lived through it. The case remains open. Go back for a second to that chalk message outside the Maggio house in 1918. Mrs. Maggio is going to sit up tonight, just like Mrs. Tony. We said the message was never explained. That's not quite true. Detectives at the time actually found a name to attach to it. Back in 1911, in that same corner of the city, an Italian grocer named Tony Sciambra and his wife were attacked in their home at night. Same kind of entry. A weapon already in the house. His wife did not survive. Neighbors had known her simply as Mrs. Tony. A detective on the 1918 case, John D'Antonio, did not think that was a coincidence. He argued the killer had not appeared out of nowhere in 1918. He believed there had been at least 2, maybe 3, nearly identical attacks on Italian grocers going back to 1910. All unsolved, all quietly forgotten once the Axeman took over the headlines. If D'Antonio was right, 1918 was not the beginning. It was a return. Here's the uncomfortable part. Modern historians are far more cautious about this connection than the newspapers were in 1919. Researchers who've spent years combing through the same old police files point out that a frightened city and a hungry press had every reason to link new murders to old ones, whether or not the link was ever real. Nobody has ever closed that gap for certain, which means there's a version of this story where the Axeman was never contained to 18 months. He was active for the better part of a decade, and whoever he was, he didn't vanish once. He vanished twice. It happened years before the world even had a word for what we now call a serial killer. A string of murders inside a single American city, all within less than 12 months. Newspapers ran the story every single day. The entire public panicked. Detectives chased leads for months, and the killer was never caught. Here's the detail that still unsettles researchers today. Several believe he didn't simply vanish. They believe he left the country, changed his methods, changed his name, and became the central figure in the most infamous unsolved murder case the world has ever known. I'm not telling you which one, not yet. But if that theory is true, one of history's most famous killers has an origin story almost nobody has ever heard. subscribe, turn notifications on, because when this one drops, you will not want to have missed the first 10 seconds.